Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/WTech. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Moving the needle. Welcome to the Washington Policy Podcast.
Curating communications, media, and tech policy news so you don't have to. News, interviews, everything you need without the axe to grind. It's the Washington Tech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
AT&T puts an end to 2-year customer agreements. The FCC reports faster home broadband speeds. And Laura Berrocal is my guest. AT&T announced last week that it is dropping its phone subsidies and 2-year agreements for customers. For years, customers have signed up for cell service with wireless providers subsidizing the cost of phones in exchange for 2-year commitments. Now, AT&T is joining a list of other providers that are doing away with 2-year agreements and building the price of phones into bills, which would drop after the phones are paid off. Recode notes the shift away from contracts could have a significant impact on how long customers keep their phones. The Federal Communications Commission has released a report on average home broadband speeds. The results show the average speed has more than tripled over the past 3 years, from 10 megabits per second in 2011 to 31 in 2014. However, the U.S. still ranks 25th in broadband speeds out of 39 countries overall. The Federal Trade Commission released its biennial report to Congress last week regarding the Do Not Call registry. Consumers register their telephone numbers with the registry to prevent calls from telemarketers. 222 million Americans are registered with the registry, 4.3 million more than the previous year. Businesses that claimed they should be able to access registrants because of an established business relationship contributed about $13.3 million in fees to access the registry last year. The Authors Guild has filed a writ of cert with the Supreme Court asking it to review a Second Circuit Court of Appeals decision that book snippets in Google Books do not violate copyright law. Google has maintained over the past 10 years that providing these excerpts from books falls within the fair use exception of copyright law. Lower court Judge Pierre Lavelle agreed, writing that providing snippets of books does not violate copyright since these snippets aren't a substitute for having the full book in hand. The Authors Guild has now asked the Supreme Court to decide on the matter, arguing that it is, quote, unprecedented judicial expansion of the fair use doctrine, end quote. The Guild is asking the court for compensation from Google for using the works rather than shutting down Google Books entirely. Finally, Quentin Tarantino has been sued for copyright infringement over Django Unchained. Oscar Colvin Jr. and Torrance J. Colvin say they wrote a screenplay for a film called Freedom, which Tarantino appropriated. They even allege that Tarantino was listed as a potential director or producer of the film, according to the Wrap. The lawsuit claims Tarantino, quote, took the plot lines and main story from Freedom and Tarantinoized them, end quote. They don't specify how much Tarantino owes them, but claim the amount would be proven at trial and likely would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Stay with us. For you, my dear listeners of the Washington Tech Policy Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a 30-day free trial to give you an opportunity to check out their service. You'll be amazed at how much time Audible will save you. It saved me so much time. I can do these podcasts and read actual books to my kids. Why not listen at the gym, in the car, on your morning run, wherever you are? How about The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil? You can download The Singularity is Near or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. Sign up for your free audiobook and 30-day trial today at audibletrial.com/WTech. My guest today is Ms. Laura Berrocal. Laura has a decade of experience working in strategic alliance and partnership building at both the national and local levels. She currently serves as Director of External Affairs at CTIA, where she manages the association's grassroots, grasstops, and third-party relationships and develops communication strategies to educate communities about CTIA's work across the wireless and tech sectors. Prior to CTIA, she served as Vice President of Public Policy and Legislative Affairs at Net Communications, where she led the development and implementation of comprehensive legislative, business development, and communication strategies for Fortune 500 companies and industry trade associations spanning the tech, telecom, media, health, and energy sectors. In previous roles with the Pennsylvania State Senate and national and international organizations such as the Multicultural Media, Telecom and Internet Council, the National Puerto Rican Coalition, and Third World Network, Ms. Berrocal has provided public policy counsel in the areas of technology, minority entrepreneurship, energy, education, and health, as well as developed results-driven communications and educational campaigns. Ms. Berrocal has appeared as a guest on HuffPost Live and Fusion TV, and her work has been featured in publications such as Minority Engineer Magazine, Fox News Latino, and Politic 365. Ms. Berrocal serves as a contributing writer to media company Silicon Valley Latino and sits on the board of directors of the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce and the board of advisors of the Multicultural Media, Telecom and Internet Council. She also serves as an advisor to Intuit's Latino Outreach Advisory Group and a member of its Diversity and Inclusion Work Group. She holds a Master of Public Administration from the George Washington University and a BA in Political Science from Temple. Please welcome Laura Berrocal. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, for having me.
Today we're going to look at the role of wireless in economic development and entrepreneurship. And when we talk about these topics, wireless isn't always the first thing to come to mind. With entrepreneurship, one tends to think of education, access to capital, perseverance, creativity. So let's back up a little bit here to the starting point of looking at this explosion we continue to see in tech, and particularly with mobile devices. So how do you see people as individuals contributing to this growth?
They're contributing greatly as consumers and as users. African Americans and Latinos are actually the groups that use wireless devices, specifically mobile technology, at the highest rate than any other group. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the tech space. Where the gaps are basically the representation of African Americans, Hispanics, and even women across the tech sector as contributors. We're seeing right now tech jobs, they're like being churned out faster than we're even prepared for. I was actually looking at a study recently from the Progressive Policy Institute, and they were talking about how tech jobs are growing across states. So like, for example, in just Michigan, a random state, their tech job growth over a 3-year period was almost 23%, and their non-tech job growth was less than 4%. And that's a trend that we're seeing across states. And I think it's something that the minority community really needs to acknowledge and really see what the value is for being engaged in this space. And working in this space. I think it's unfortunate that women, we make up more than 50% of the population, and we're the most underrepresented when it comes to Silicon Valley. And Hispanic women, Latinas, are, we fare worse of them all. So those are things that we really need to change. But I think that there's some bright spots. Clearly the wireless industry has been really good about making sure that their workforce is diverse and inclusive. They've had years to be able to work on this, and they have a great track record. I think that when we're looking at Silicon Valley companies and more emerging tech companies, that's where we need to kind of, just make sure that we're more cognizant of the fact that there needs to be more efforts to focus on the diversity issue. And certainly companies are invested, I think, in changing that dynamic and making sure that there is more diversity and inclusivity. I also think it's up to us, as a community to say, what are the best ways to help companies find us as candidates?
So, Laura, we hear a lot about science, technology, engineering, and math. Several of my guests on this podcast have focused on STEM. Kim Scott from Arizona State in episode 1, Kevin Clark from George Mason University in episode 7, Courtney Tannenbaum, episode 10. What are your thoughts on STEM, and what would it mean from an economic standpoint if we were to, say, double the representation of students from underrepresented groups who excel at STEM while they're still in school?
Well, I think this, when we're looking at science, technology, engineering, and math, it's really become a fad, a trend in recent years, which I think is a great thing. STEM jobs on average pay higher. In fact, when you're looking at the salary brackets, we have STEM jobs that are actually growing at a much faster rate than the national average of income for all other jobs, which is, that's a huge opportunity for the minority community. And I think that they've realized that we're seeing an increase in the level of engagement in those degrees. But the problem right now is that even though we're seeing a little bit of traction there, we're not necessarily seeing that reflected in the workforce numbers of companies. And I think that that's not necessarily the industry's fault 100%. I think that now that we have more minorities that are getting into those fields, it's going to take time to kind of make sure that they're in that pipeline and being hired up. But I'm glad to see that there's a lot of investment by the tech sector to advance this specific priority and make sure that diversity and inclusion is part of STEM moving forward. There's a lot of great opportunities for Hispanics and for African Americans and women to be engaged in the high tech industry and even in Silicon Valley through STEM fields. So I think there's a great opportunity there.
And how is wireless contributing to all this growth we're seeing in the tech sector?
Well, wireless is, it's really interesting because wireless is an industry that's, it's obviously been around for a while, but now we're seeing the introduction, or we have been for, the past, 5-10 years now with the smartphones and the tablets. And this is really fueling much of that growth. And people are really seeing a value in being connected. I think that there's a cultural shift that's taken place in terms of people's understanding of technology and being connected. I think that when you're looking at wireless and the opportunities that it's creating across the tech sector, I think you can't not see the impact that the app economy has had. When you look at the global app economy, I mean, it's worth $70 billion, which is huge, and it's projected to reach almost $145 billion by next year. So, and this is in huge parts due to the growth that we're seeing in smartphone ownership. So one of the things that we really need to be mindful of is making sure that people understand that the wireless industry needs to stay competitive, and we need to be able to maintain our strength and our positioning. Right now, we do lead. The industry is super strong, but we also need to make sure that consumers understand all of the implications that come with building and growing and deploying better services. And that also comes with it, a lot of policy implications as well. So oftentimes people aren't really paying attention to the policies that are important for an industry, but there are, it's so incredibly tied to the potential for this industry. So, one issue that we've been dealing with a lot is spectrum, and people may not, necessarily understand what spectrum is, but you can consider it the lifeblood of the industry. It's the one resource that's needed to allow the industry to function and to make sure that services are available and reliable, and consumers don't need to worry about if your phone's not working, this and that. Like, you need to make sure that those kinds of policies are in place to support the industry. CTIA specifically has done recently a kind of a brand refresh. And one of the reasons they did that is because they see the change in the wireless industry, and they understand that they need to change the message of how they're talking to people about the industry, because it's changing so much and because there's so much growth. You really need to think the industry is tying every device. When you're on social media, when you're on Twitter, when you're on Facebook, when you're on your mobile device, your tablet, that's the industry that's fueling that and making sure that connectivity is there. And we need to get smarter about how we're talking to people about the work of wireless carriers and all of the manufacturers that are involved in the making of devices. This is important. And we need to also be prepared to move into the next phase of the industry, which is, we're enjoying 4G. We want to move into 5G. When you look at the global economy, they're already kind of moving in that direction. And if we have barriers, whether they're policy barriers or regulatory barriers, that's going to hinder not only the opportunity for the industry to grow, but it's also going to impact the services that consumers have come to rely on. And it's going to impact how creative the wireless industry is within the United States, at least.
What are you most concerned about when it comes to multicultural communities and their relationship to technology, say 5 or 10 years from now?
Well, clearly we all know the digital society, our reliance on all things mobile and devices and wireless, that's here to stay. I love a quote from YouTube CEO. She's always said technology is changing our lives in ways that we can't imagine now, and it's just getting started. And I think she's so right in that messaging, because we're like right at the beginning. And when we're looking at how this industry is going to continue to grow in the next decade, for example, there is such a huge opportunity for minorities to be part of that story and to lead by innovation and example. And I don't want to look back. Like, I would hate especially for women and Latinas in particular, as a Hispanic woman, to look back and say, wow, I missed the mark. That was a time to really roll up my sleeves and get involved in this space, and I didn't do it. So I think that that's an area where we really need to start opening our eyes and realizing that we don't just need to benefit as a consumer, as a user, but we can contribute and we can really benefit as innovators and people that are actually creating the very devices and products that everyone is coming to enjoy.
What are some other angles we should be considering, Laura? Is it just STEM that people should be concerned about? Are there other jobs within the same companies that maybe don't rely as heavily on STEM?
I think right now the tech wave is still in its early stages, clearly. And if we position ourselves in the right way now, we can be big players. And STEM is a start. We also need to start getting more minorities in the industry working. But I also think as we look at companies like, companies in Silicon Valley that are really looking to diversify, we need to also think about how the minority community can be part of those conversations from a non-tech standpoint. So basically, you have all kinds of positions in these kinds of companies that don't necessarily require technical skills, but still, diversity is important for any business. And even though it's a tech company, you don't necessarily have to go in working in a tech field. Right. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for especially for women to be able to go into these companies in a different role and still help the company grow, move in the right direction, innovate, expand, grow, and be part of that legacy. And I also think we need to look at the tech startup world because, we have our big companies, but we also have a lot of technology startups that are surfacing, and a lot of minority faces are behind those companies. So, as entrepreneurs, I think there's an opportunity, but on the flip side, there's also an opportunity, and I also think a responsibility for the minority community to not only be asking for the funding and the seed money for a company, but also to serve as investors. I think that when we look at the venture capital world, it's a small space, clearly. And women only make up a little over 4% of the venture capital firms. So we don't have a lot of diversity in who's funding companies and startups. And I think that's something we really need to sit back and think about for a second, because if we're not even in that world of investment, then how can we expect, these startups to be successful, especially minority-owned startups, if we don't have our own people kind of vouching and kind of promoting those kinds of companies and the leadership behind those companies. So I think we really need to think about all aspects, working in the industry, serving as entrepreneurs, but also serving as investors.
Laura, it's been an absolute honor having you on the show today. Let's transition to the section of the interview where I like to look at the people behind the policies. So I just have a few more questions and then we'll close. Sound like a plan?
Sure.
What are some of your productivity secrets? They can be habits, apps, daily routines, basically anything that keeps you on top of your game.
You know, a lot of people expect me to have some kind of probably a tech response because I've worked in the tech space for a while, but I think that my one habit that I do that I can actually say I'm consistent with, and I have been for the past several months, is waking up early to do a little workout before I go to work. I mean, when I take the time to do a workout in the morning, or even if it's like in the afternoon, I'm always happier and more energized. And I feel like it really does make me more productive. So that's my recommendation. Healthy.
I know, and for me, the holidays were just a total free-for-all in terms of the food I was eating and staying in shape. I'm definitely going to be one of those people at the gym who hasn't been there in months and shows up with the herd. For the rest of you out there in the herd, you are not alone. If you're at the gym this very moment, I'm definitely with you in spirit while you're on that treadmill right now, that's for sure. But let's get a sense for your reading list, Laura. What's a must-read for you?
The most recent book that I read is a book called Restless. The author is a woman by the name Jenny Allen, and it seeks to inspire people to kind of find purpose in their life and live life to the fullest. But the way she does it is by reaching out and messaging to like people that feel restless, hence the title of the book. And the whole purpose of the book is to realize that, you know, you can be a better person and you can focus on the priorities in life and you can dream big, but also lean on, you know, your network and your faith to be able to go the places that you want to go. And most importantly, listen to your gut when things tell you, when your gut's telling you that's not good, because clearly that's a clear indication that someone's trying to tell you something.
It's so easy to lose touch with our own basic instincts. We've heard it so many times, but it's always good to have a fresh perspective on that when it comes to listening to your gut. So I'll include a link to that in the show notes. And you've been listening to Laura Berrocal, CTIA's brand new Director of External Affairs. Laura, do you have any final words you'd like to leave with the audience?
I would just say, you know, I've seen so many great examples of minority success stories. I think that we have, even though, you know, we're dealing with challenges across the tech space, I think that there's so many leaders and people that are doing amazing things that we really should take note of the accomplishments of leaders within our community and make sure that we're supporting them and also, you know, being inspired by them and making sure that we're building our networks. Because I think, you know, your network is, if that's strong, you really have a lot more opportunity to go a lot further in life.
And where can folks find you if they want to reach out?
I have a profile on Twitter. So my handle is #LauraB, and I'm also on LinkedIn. So and if you Google me, I'm sure you'll be able to find a lot of different ways to connect with me.
Laura, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And that concludes episode 20 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. I cannot do any of this without you, so thank you. If you're new to the podcast, or even if you've been listening for a while, I have a free cheat sheet for all of my new email subscribers, and you can find the sign up. For that at washingtech.com/cheat sheet. And that cheat sheet is a guide for you to get up to speed on various different policy areas, including cybersecurity, intellectual property, net neutrality, and other areas. It's a quick reference anytime you're preparing for a meeting or writing something you need citations for. That's washingtech.com/cheat sheet. Thanks again to all of you for listening, and I will see you back here next week. Take care. Oh, and Happy New Year.
Thanks for listening to the Washing Tech Policy Podcast. You've been briefed.